I'm Scott Miller. It is the 19th of October 2023. This is my vlog of daily life living in Nicaragua. Today I'm going to be breaking down some cost for you to help with understanding what it might cost to move to a new country, specifically this one. Now, anytime we talk about cost, it gets very complicated because what it costs for one person is completely different than what it's going to cost for someone else. I can tell you all about what it costs for me to move here, but my factors will be very different. For example, I have 2 dogs and you may not. I have children and you may not. I have a spouse and you may not. And we live in Leon and you may go somewhere else. And we like to live in certain areas that may be different than where you want to live, and on and on and on. Everything can be very different. And so what one person may be able to move here for less than $1,000, another person may need $50,000, right? It's the nature of things. But moving to a new country incurs a lot of cost that people may not be thinking about or cognizant of. So we want to talk about some of that and just give you kind of a real world breakdown of one person who actually did move here and get an idea of what was spent for them. But we're going to get to that right after the bump. Happy Thursday, everybody. I hope you have some coffee and you're feeling warm because we're actually chilly here. It has been raining all day. I'm actually filming this slightly in the future on Saturday when I did a bunch of filming, and it's just been a very drizzly day. We actually had so much rain that I was in the shower taking a hot shower, and with our windows open, because you normally have windows open here, there was as much water blowing in through the window of really cold, fresh rain as there was hot water coming out of the suicide shower. It was very surprising. We don't normally get that much coming in, so this has been kind of a weird rain day, but I do enjoy it. I hope that the images look good from this because it is pretty dark, but the light and the sound and the mood is really cool, so trying to blend things as best as I can. So today's topic: what does it cost in a real world example to move into Nicaragua? So we're going to do a whole bunch of assumptions on this and kind of give you a baseline, and then these numbers are going to be meaningless, but I'm going to give you the breakdown so you can do your best to take these and try to apply them to you. So what this example is this is a real world single person moved into Nicaragua and brought essentially nothing with them. They had just their luggage, some clothes. So everybody's different. When you move, are you going to move with luggage? Are you going to bring your own clothes? Do you have to resupply all of your own clothes? That would be a big deal. When we came, we brought a lot of household items with us, a lot of computers and monitors and video game systems, and we had 11 pieces of luggage, if I remember correctly, for 4 people plus the dogs. We got to bring extra weight because we came on a private plane. We were coming from a home that we were able to pack up as much as we could muster. And we've moved from country to country quite a bit as a family, and so we had a fair idea of what we needed to bring and what we needed to pack and how to make that as easy as possible. We also were planning on moving into a pre-rented place because someone was ahead of us and had put some things into motion. So for us, the cost of moving into a new place here was relatively low. We spent almost nothing to move in when we first got here. Over time, we spent lots as we started buying things that we wanted, started supplying more things, but our actual move-in was very cheap. This particular example that I'm going to give today is someone it's an individual. They moved and had moved before, so in theory had a fair idea of what it takes to move into a new country, because pretty much if you're going to be starting over in a new country, you need everything potentially, right? If you're going to be staying in a hotel and you're always going to be eating at restaurants, you may be able to do just fine with nothing but your cell phone, a passport, and enough money to pay for dinner at the restaurant. But if you're going to be getting an apartment, which is kind of where we're going here, you're going to need to supply certain things, and here that includes a lot of your white products. What are those called? The appliances, right? The washer, the dryer, the oven, and those kinds of things. So that tends to provide quite a bit of cost compared to moving into an apartment somewhere else, but the cost per month is going to be less. So it's all a balance, right? But understanding where those costs are, where you expect to spend lots of money and where you expect to spend very little is very important. Before we get into the shopping, let's talk about the apartment that's going to be used in this example. Originally, this person was looking for a very small apartment, possibly a studio, but possibly a 1-bedroom, something that would be very efficient and near to the city with easy access to things. Here in Leon, which is the area they were looking in, finding apartments can be a little bit difficult. They ended up getting a great deal on a house instead and decided to go that direction, which played into many of the other decisions. So this is important to just keep in mind, depending on how quickly you want to pick something out, what place you choose, and we don't have endless options. So you pretty much have to look at the market and decide what to take that's on the market at that given time. If you go to a place like Miami or a very large city, Bogota, you can pretty much say, well, there's this type of apartment, this type of condo, this type of different things, and there's thousands of those exact things on the market. So you say, what should a one bedroom, 50 square meters, what would that cost? And you can come up with a pretty good range. And if you don't like one, or there's always another on the market. But here in Leon, if there's a house of a certain part of town that's the size you want, it may be the only one. And so you don't have this just wait for the next one. You kind of need to see what's available, decide if something meets your needs, and then grab it. It's a very different thing. So in this particular case, we found a house for this person in a perfect area, absolutely ideal setting, and the house was simply way too large. They were looking for a studio. This is a 3-bedroom with a large interior courtyard. So it's just a lot of extra space. What they decided to do was to close off all the bedrooms and convert basically the living room into just being a studio apartment. Kind of weird, but functional. It was actually kind of a neat idea, but it left a lot of the house unused. We had originally budgeted about $350 per month for housing. This particular house ended up coming in at $200 per month. So that was just barely more than half, and a massive savings on a per month basis, but it did pose more work up front because it was not a ready-to-go studio apartment. It was a house that needed walls modified and some things fixed. So it was a very different approach than you would normally have expected for something like this, but it was a little bit of how can you be creative here, and getting an entire house with 3 bedrooms plus a good size living room, a full kitchen, nothing particularly special, a nice interior courtyard with plenty of room for tables and chairs in a garden-like setting, not large by any stretch, but inside the house it had all this really good protected space, plus extra bathrooms and a laundry area. Like, there was a good amount of space for $200. This was truly a steal as far as space and location went. This is inside a gated community for $200 a month, but definitely one of the cheaper houses and on one of the less desirable streets. The street in this particular case was dirt road. It was very close to the concrete, to the tarmac, but it was actually a dirt part of the road, so it's set back a little bit and not absolutely ideal, but for $200 it was a really desirable community and a good sized house at an incredible price. So that was a starting point for having a really good budget, because pretty much anything that you had to overspend with up front would over time be made up by just how much cost savings there was in the housing budget. Because all of our planning was around $350 per month, which is generally pretty safe if you're on kind of a tighter budget. Not a super tight budget, but a reasonably tight budget. If you can allot $350 a month, and you're almost never going to have to spend more than that. We knew we could get into really nice houses at $350 if necessary, right? Just having to play the odds, and maybe reduce cost over time. In this case, finding something for $200, and in theory, there were options for just a smidgen less, for like 10% less. There could have been more budget cutting even within this realm, but this one met the need really well. And at $200, that meant $1,500 a month savings. That meant annually, that's $1,800 less than originally budgeted. So even if we were to go over by, say, almost $10,000 in total upfront budget, which is crazy. But if we were to go over by $10,000 what was expected, yes, it would take 5 to 6 years before that was made up. But in 5 to 6 years, it would be as cheap or cheaper than not having had to invest because of the savings in the housing based on the planned budget. So just important to kind of look at those things and understand how those numbers play out when doing these budgets. But okay, so you now have the setting. This is a 3-bedroom house that's been converted to act kind of like a studio, kind of like a 1-bedroom, because it had a separate kitchen. So normally a 1-bedroom is a combined living space with a separate bedroom. This is a combined living space with a separate kitchen. Awkward, but worked. Also worth noting, it's a larger space than was originally intended. So if you have a larger space and you need air conditioning, which most people moving in are going to need air conditioning, be aware that if you have a larger space, you're going to need more air conditioning. That will play into our budgets in just a minute. But what we're going to do now is we're just going to tear down an item by item of what was purchased. And we'll talk about what stores and what individual things cost so that you have a really accurate picture of what a very recent, about a month ago, purchase of an entire new life in Nicaragua cost when going to actual stores in Leon. None of this means these are the prices you will get, but these are the prices that some real world person got in the last several weeks. And it was the list of things that they spent money on when they moved here from somewhere else. Of course, over time, you're going to find you want to buy a set of tools. You're going to want to have a nice flashlight. You're going to, little things will always add up. You want a nicer set of plates. You want more glasses. Of course, over time, whether you're living in your home country or a new one, you will over time buy more things. But a lot of people, when they're moving to a new country, may not be thinking about the fact that they're going to need shower curtains, completely refreshing all of their shampoo and soaps and things like that. There's just so many little things that come up. Keep in mind, you'll need to buy all of those things that are traditionally consumable, or things like shower curtains that you normally only buy when you move first into a new apartment. Think about that, right? Moving to a new country is a little bit like getting your first apartment. You're moving out of your parents' house. You have nothing. You have to buy every single little thing. That could be what it's like. For a lot of us, that's not a big budgetary item. It's not something we have to really stop and worry about. But if you're on a tighter budget, or you just want to plan really, really well, those are things you need to be aware of that you're going to need. It's easy to overlook. Okay, because all the prices that were done in this list are in Cordoba. That is the Nicaraguan currency. That's what I'm going to say them in. So be aware, these numbers are going to sound really large. The exchange rate at the time that this is happening is 37 Cordoba to the dollar. So if we have something that costs 3,700 Cordoba, in your mind, think that's $100. I know that's hard to remember, but every time we say something, I'll do my best to give a little bit of an estimate, but just remember, divide by 37, any number we say. So if something costs 37, it's $1. If something costs 3,700, that's $100. If something costs 7,200, 7,400, that is $200, right? Get out a calculator. You'll be able to do this really quickly. Nothing is super expensive. We'll try to give you some ballparks of things. So starting from the very beginning, the shopping went to a closet organizer. So this is a large stand-up closet. A lot of these things are things you need, right? There's gonna be very boring items here. That cost 2,239 Cordoba, so probably about $70 to $80 if I'm guessing. And these are broken down by store because there was a lot of shopping in different places, right? They put in some time shopping around as they did this. So they went to it's called a ferreteria. That's a hardware store. And at there, they bought I love this, it's a destupidor. It sounds like something that makes you less stupid, and in a way it is, but that's a plunger. So that's 120 Cordoba. Cepillo sanitario, that is a brush for the toilet, 115 Cordoba. Cordel, that's some rope, 44 Cordoba. This is called Ducha Electrica, but that is a suicide shower. That was 670 Cordoba, so really not expensive at all for that. Linterna LED rechargeable and a Bombillo LEDs. These are lamps, like bathroom lamps. They didn't like, apparently, whatever lighting was already there, so they put in some of their own LED lighting in the bathroom. These are things you wouldn't have to do. So you can see already we're getting into, I don't want to say luxury items, that's definitely not what it is, but we're not looking at a how tight can we make your budget kind of thing. This is a making a comfortable life with, you know, oh, I don't like the lighting that's here, I don't like, you know, whatever. So that kind of stuff. Then at another hardware store, I don't know what this item is. It's 15 meters of TSJ. I believe that is some of the wall material necessary for putting up, they put up extra drywall as part of this project. So I had to buy a few things. It may also be electrical stuff. The cost I'm about to say are all extra electrical items because the house was not wired up for electrical to handle air conditioning, and so they had to put in a whole breaker panel and everything as part of the move-in, which is not a big deal, but those are items that you would generally not think of needing to budget for. And it's worth noting, as we were looking at this house, because of the large space, it was not wired for 220 electric. It was only wired for 110 electric. That meant it could only use smaller air conditioning units. Plenty big under normal circumstances, but slightly less efficient, and they only go up to 12,000 BTUs. That space, they recommended 24,000 BTUs, so 2 of the larger 110 units. To power that, They were all set with the service from the road because that was 110, but they didn't have a breaker panel that could handle it, so a new breaker panel had to be purchased and installed. That kind of stuff can add up a lot of extra costs that you're just not thinking of. So always be aware, if I'm going to do those things, no single item is going to be big. When you put them all together, they can feel like quite a bit. So breaker box, 600 Cordoba, 20 amp breakers, 240 Cordoba, some PVC for the piping, 50 Cordoba, that's less than, or just less than $2. Some stock, which is one of the pieces for that, 220 Cordoba. Some conduit, 2 different types of conduit coming out to 270 Cordoba. So that stuff, it starts to add up. And then they needed 2 meters of solid cabling for that, 110 Cordoba. So we'll get back to more costs on air conditioning, but remember, putting in 2 air conditioning units instead of 1, that creates a lot of installation costs and a lot of wiring. In many circumstances, you're gonna have a place that's already wired for some amount of air conditioning, and typically if you're in like an apartment and on a tight budget, you're only gonna be putting in 1 unit, if any, and so a lot of these costs would be half, or some of these things like the breaker box wouldn't exist at all. So this could be misleading for you, but if you're like us and you're coming into a big house and you're putting in like 9 air conditioning units, then the cost could be much higher. Just adjust as best you can. I just want to make sure you have some ideas of individual things, what they cost, so you can break it down and do your own calculations. From the store Tropigas. Now, believe it or not, Tropigas is the company that delivers you your cooking gas, the canisters of gas. It is also a store that sells really basic stuff like pillows and beds. I don't know why it's like that, but it is. Okay, so a lavadora was purchased, which is a washing machine, so 12,000 Cordoba. That is something you can definitely do without, but a lot of people do want. 3 almohadas, those are pillows, for a total of 1,325 Cordoba. And a bed, 10,250 Cordoba. Those are some large items, but you definitely need a bed and bedding. Then from a store called Capesa, this one, okay, real quick, just taking aside, because all these numbers are mixed together, but they're worth mentioning. So in this particular case, we're gonna say in an area like this, which is relatively rural, it is possible to take taxis places, but your taxi costs are gonna be higher than if you live in the city. It is also possible to take the public bus. Nearly everywhere in the city, and definitely out here, has lots of public bus options. From where we live, we can easily take a bus out to the beach. We can also easily take a bus into the city. We have lots of options. We also have some other public transportation nearby, like the people on the 3-wheeled bicycles that you can sit on a bench and they'll bike you around. There's ways to get around depending on where you wanna go and how fast you have to get there, and if you're willing to walk a little bit first. And if you wanna be really, really cheap, the buses are like way under 50 cents and maybe like 25 cents to go into the city, and there's multiple routes here, so you can go to different parts of the city. So very convenient, but I don't know that much about how the buses work. I've used some, but not others, and some of them are new, so that's changed. Taking a taxi from here, we do all the time. But all that said, those options exist. So if you're on an extreme budget, absolutely you have ways to live super cheap, even out here where the electric is dirt cheap. We estimate that for this apartment, their electric would not have topped, under normal circumstances, had anybody been sane, about $15. Of course, if you're doing crazy things and running outrageous air conditioning around the clock, it can add up to quite a bit. But normal people, we have like 9 air conditioning units here. We run some of them all the time, many of them part of the time, and our monthly electrical budget with all the things, all the computers and all the uploads and all the video cameras and all that stuff, about $45. So you can hopefully gauge a little bit from that. I've never heard of anyone paying much under $15. There are definitely people in the city who pay hundreds of dollars. We used to pay many hundreds of dollars when we lived in Granada, but we think we were getting ripped off by someone faking the meter. But out here with regular meter reads, $45 roughly month after month after month. So we have a pretty good idea that that is what our electrical is going to cost. All of that said was to preface, this particular person decided that having a scooter, which is, you know, like a motorcycle but smaller, doesn't require all the same licensure, and is, you know, more fuel efficient and all that, was something that they wanted. They were used to that. That's how they had lived previously. They wanted to bring that to this area. So they went out and bought a scooter, absolutely unneeded, and a very large ticket item for this overall budget. But worth mentioning, it's the kind of thing you may not think about that you might need to replace a vehicle. And many people are going to be like, well, I want a car, but you may want a motorcycle or a scooter or a bicycle. There's a lot of different options. So just want to preface that this is all decisions that were made by this particular person for their needs. They got a relatively cheap but new scooter, and that was 58,765 Cordoba. Definitely not a tiny item. That was getting closer to $2,000. They needed insurance, 1,278 Cordoba. Some other paperwork, 495 Cordoba, and some taxes, 50 Cordoba, only $2. So just be aware, that's what all that is. If you don't want to get a scooter or don't want to get a scooter right away, none of those costs apply to you. Then at a store we use a lot here, Mendoza, which is kind of downtown. They have some really good prices and they treat us really well. And they do free delivery here in the city and fast. So those are big deals. 2 air conditioning units. Each was 14,600 Cordoba. Remember, you may not need air conditioning, but you probably do. You'll probably want to spend a little bit more on a single one, but only one, not two. There is Yao. Everyone say hello to Yao as she leaves. She can't actually hear you, but if you say it, you know, she'll spiritually be connected to you in a better way. A refrigerator. So these are the kinds of things you definitely are going to want under normal circumstances. 12,593 Cordoba. Not super expensive, but it is a big ticket item for a move-in. 2 plastic chairs for just sitting around the house, 840 Cordobas each. A kitchen table, 1,278 Cordoba. A microwave, 3,285 Cordoba. Liquidora. I actually have to look up what that is. I believe that is a unit for keeping drinks cool or warm, depending. Because we have one, I think that's what that unit is called. I don't know every single word in Spanish. 1,825 Cordoba. The cafetera, that is a coffee maker, 1,085 Cordoba. Here's one you definitely don't have to have. And a rosera, that is a rice maker, 1,205 Cordoba. 3, and this is a funny word, we're gonna teach you a little Nicaraguan today. The word is abanico, and it is spelled with a B, so A-B-A-N-I-C-O. Abanico is fan. It is a local Nicaraguan slang for fan. It could be a ceiling fan, it could be a floor fan, it could be any kind of fan, just fan. So in this case, this particular person bought 3 abanicos at $1,022 each. Pretty typically, if you're gonna have like a studio apartment, everyone here wants a fan. Fans are flexible for a lot of reasons, so definitely plan on getting one. But 3 per person is pretty extreme. There aren't many circumstances where you need that many. I could see needing 2 or wanting 1 and a backup just in case that one wears out. Like, that's fine. But here with a lot of people in a really big house, we have only maybe 2. We never use them, but we have them just in case they need to be moved around or whatever. It's really limited. Some people will use a fan all the time and then not air conditioning, and then you definitely need one. But if you're using air conditioning, then you really rarely would need a fan. So this is an extreme circumstance, and I think this particular person, I'm just hypothesizing, while having a lot of experience living in tropical countries, was doing so always with tons of air conditioning and never treating it like they were living in that place. And so maintaining ridiculously like European style indoor temperatures, which is not a good way to go. That while it's your choice, my recommendation strongly is to consider adapting. Instead, you will spend an absolute fortune trying to keep yourself that cold. It is not practical in any way. Let your body adjust and you will free yourself of the shackles of at least super low air temperatures. But also it means that if you're expecting, you know, 69 degrees room temperature Fahrenheit at home, and then you go to a restaurant and it's 95, you're going to be miserable. And you're going to be miserable at every restaurant, every bar, every activity for the rest of your time staying here, which might just be months, or it could be the rest of your life, which could also be months, but let's hope not. And you don't want to be in that kind of situation. You want to adapt and be able to go out. And it's a really big deal for us that we put in that time. And it probably took us more than the necessary 2 months, but within the first 6 months, we adjusted. And it's easy to look back at our early time living here and we're going into the city, we're going out to a restaurant, and we're just, oh, can we sit under a fan? I hope there's enough air there. It is so hot. It was just miserable. And now we go to the same restaurants at hotter conditions and don't even think about it. We wear heavier clothes, don't have to worry worry about it at all because we've adapted. We've adjusted to the temperatures, and we don't live in air conditioning all day long. You guys see me, I'm out in the sunlight right now. It's nice and cold, but I'm out in really brutal hot temperatures, 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon with bright sun, and I'm just out walking around for large periods of time. Yes, with between walking and being in the sun and carrying the camera and talking, yeah, I start to get a bit sweaty, but I can go out and be perfectly comfortable and do things in really hot temperatures because we live in doing so. Because I do that, because I keep my office doors open a lot of the time, because our living room is open to the outside, because we sit outside half the day, we're adjusted to the temperature. So when we go to those restaurants, when we go to concerts, when we go to whatever events, we don't think about the temperature. We're comfortable all the time because it's our natural temperature. It really does make a difference. I think this person was trying to avoid that and ended up buying so much air conditioning and so many fans, and just so much expense pouring into trying to figure out how to not be in Nicaragua. Consider that a red flag, that it may mean this isn't something you're really ready for, that you're really thinking of it in that way. It is your decision. I can't tell you, it's not that it's wrong, it's just, I really think it's worth a strong warning that if you're not planning on adapting, if you're planning on fighting this process from the moment you arrive, you are going to spend so much and get so little out of the Nicaraguan experience. You're probably better off looking at some place with a cooler climate, and there are wonderful options with much cooler climates not that far away if you like a lot of the things you're hearing about Nicaragua, but that is something you're just not willing to compromise on. You can at least look at cooler portions of Nicaragua. This is the hottest almost. Not the hottest, but very close. So if that's a problem, this is not the portion of the country for you. Matagalpa, Esteli, Jinotega, they're gonna be way better, Ocotal. And if those areas are not significantly cool enough, then you need to be thinking about the El Salvadors, the northwestern Honduras's, or the central Guatemalas, where you're gonna have, or a lot of Mexico, where you're gonna have really nice mild temperatures, and be able to live probably with fresh air at temperatures that you like. And if you don't want to be at fresh air and you want to be in air conditioning, it will cost very little to run that tiny bit of air conditioning it takes to regulate the temperature, right? You may get fluctuations outside, but you're not dramatically changing the outside by 30 degrees, right? If you want your indoors to be 69, Guatemala might vary from 62 to 75, right? And the air conditioning that you have on will keep you from getting super cold when it gets cold out and keep you from getting super warm when it's slightly warm out. And so that makes sense, and an air conditioning does that relatively efficiently. Here, if you're trying to cool your house to 69 degrees and it's 90 something outside, your air conditioning is going to struggle really, really hard and be very inefficient as it tries to cool such a dramatic amount away from the base outside temperature. And even at night, it's going to be fighting against a lot of ambient heat in the ground, in the walls, in the trees, in everything. All right, we have a Cesta de Ropa Sucia. That is a clothes hamper, 220 Cordoba. Mesa Metallica, two. Those are metal, just metal tables, 1,825. Those are probably being used as like end tables by a bed or something, so I mean, it may not be something you need. Tanque de gas lleno, that is a full tank of cooking gas, 3,380 Cordoba. That you're not going to be able to get away from unless someone's providing you cooking stuff. Like you're going to need that. And then 4 benches, 375 Cordoba each. Something I do want to point out, a lot of these things are plastic goods. If you want to get like wooden furniture and wooden products, a lot of that's made in Nicaragua, and it's going to cost not as cheap as plastic, but it's going to be cheaper than equivalent wood somewhere else. Those are artisan products made by hand here in country, and the prices are very reasonable, so you get more for your money getting it in wood. Plastic is generally not made here. Extremely few plastic goods are made in country, so anything you're buying plastic, like any appliance or anything, is all being shipped in from another country. China, the Koreas, Japan, Vietnam, whatever. Those places are shipping overseas, and we have to pay import taxes and the shipping cost, and it's made somewhere else, and so those items all cost, even like just little plastic chairs and stuff, you're not going to get this big savings over, say, the US or Europe, which some people expect because they're like, well, but it's a cheaper place, so they must be selling cheap things even cheaper. And it doesn't work that way. There's a cost to make those things, and a cost to ship those things, and a cost to stock those things in a warehouse, and the cost of the labor to sell it to you is a pretty tiny piece of the overall picture, and so the ability to shave off cost by lowering that is practically zero, but the extra cost of having a lower scale or needing to ship things farther is pretty significant. And so generally you're going to find even little plastic bins and stuff are going to be slightly more expensive here than in, say, the US, just because it's harder to get them here. It's literally harder for the longshoremen to put them onto the boat in China and get them here than to Long Beach in California. And there's, you know, only a fraction coming here as to what is going to California. And so you're stuck in a state of, it just costs more to get those things here. So you're going to pay a premium on some of that stuff and make it up on your rent and other costs, things that involve local labor. All right, continuing on at La Curacao. This is a large US-owned chain. They also owned Radio Shack with a lot of different things. Okay, lamps, 1,330 Cordoba, 2 of those. An espejo, a mirror, 644 Cordoba. A center table, 1,850 Cordoba. A small lamp, 957 Cordoba. Another mirror, a full mirror kit, 1,478 Cordoba. Contentador, I honestly don't know what this one is at all, 585 Cordoba. Then that is the bulk of the cost. The last thing is from another hardware store, and there is a water dispenser. These are very simple. It's basically a plastic thing that you put a 5-gallon thing of water onto so that you can dispense it, because how else do you get the water out of your big 5-gallon jug? 425 Cordoba. The first jug of water, 200 Cordoba, and a solar lamp, 865 Cordoba, and for some reason, yet another fan, 1,600 Cordoba. And so there you have all the things that were purchased by someone moving in. I do know there's 1 or 2 things missing there that were purchased ad hoc previously, but they're very, very small items, like $15 to $30 at most. So figure maybe a total of about $100 US additional on top of all those costs was spent to make this all happen. So that was a move-in with, I did not include installation of the air conditioning. That is going to be a little bit expensive, but in this case it was 2 air conditioning, not 1. So obviously the costs were all much larger than expected. But also in this, there was no internet because the person in question wasn't using internet at home, didn't have a computer. So there's a lot of expenses that normal people would have, like having a desk and whatever things for a computer. They didn't have that stuff. And they didn't have a television. So some of these things are really surprisingly cheap because they weren't buying things that you expect you're going to need. And in other situations, like they were getting more pillows than you would expect in that size of an apartment, way more chairs than you would expect, and a scooter and all kinds of things that seem rather spendy if you're on a budget. If you're not on a budget, like, of course, whatever, buy 100 pillows, right? So all those items we can kind of add up and have an idea of what their move-in cost was to get started with a studio apartment being set up and able to move in. And I do notice as we're going through the list, like there's no forks and spoons and knives and cups. Those things weren't listed. Those are obviously pretty cheap. You go to the market, you're paying very low amounts, but it's gonna be similar to going to a Walmart. You can go to a Walmart. One of the things we do here for a lot of that stuff is we go to Maxi Pali or a Pali, but Maxi Pali is best. And that is essentially a Walmart on minimized, right? A very small scale Walmart, but things like cups and plates, and that's perfect. That's exactly what they're for. But I know that Paul, unrelated to all this, bought a TV at Maxi Pali this week and got it for some ridiculous price, like $400 for a nice big new TV because it was overstocked and it just happened to be the one item that they had at a really good price. So sometimes you're going to get stuff like that there. Sometimes you get your fans there, but you'll always get like your simple stuff you're going to use around the kitchen that you need to have, your shower curtains and some plastic bins, those kinds of things. Reliably at Maxi Pali, it is Walmart. It's not like a Walmart. It's not Walmart in our ecosystem. It is literally owned by Walmart, and it says Walmart when you're in it. We do have Walmarts here, but not in Leon, so Maxi Pali is the closest thing we get to having a supply chain from Walmart here. And of course, a lot of items, if you have your own car or you're going to be taking transportation with someone or you're living in Managua, you'll be using PriceSmart for a lot of things. If you're in Managua, PriceSmart does a lot to lower the cost of just living in Nicaragua by making you able to get these really good deals with high quality products there. We can shop there, obviously, and we do all the time, but if we buy like a large appliance there, we have to drive to Managua, load it into a car, and drive it all the way back here. That's a bit difficult. That adds a lot of complication and cost to something that if you lived in Managua or you already had a truck that was going back and forth, could be very nominal. So just things to be aware of. I'm hoping that these prices just give you things to think about, so when you're like, what does it cost to do normal everyday things? These are real prices. You can add them up. Obviously, you don't need 4 fans per person. That's not normal, so adjust accordingly. If we take that list of all the things that were spent in order to move in, including the scooter, including double air conditioning, including all the extra fans and all the extra seats and all that stuff, we're looking at a total expenditure of less than $4,500 US, $4,478. If you were to take that, keep in mind, all that was purchased at a rush to move in very quickly, which made sense, like that's not a bad thing, and all here in Leon, which is not the cheapest place. You could get better prices in Managua, but only slightly. Just the tiniest savings. Your cost of housing, it will probably offset it. Although Managua does have some amazing pricing, so depending on where you want to live, you can live super cheap in Managua for sure. And it could be a good choice for you. Not trying to sell you on Leon. No, I'm just kidding. I am obviously trying to sell you on Leon. I love it here. In all of that, if you were to take out the scooter and all of the things that are, you know, licensing and insurance for the scooter, and you took out the second air conditioning unit and only had one. So if you were actually moving into an apartment or simply had a reasonable amount of air conditioning, and cut out a couple of the completely superfluous fans, right? But still had multiple fans for a single person. You would literally cut the price exactly in half and come in at just a little bit over $2,240 as a full move-in cost. Now notice we didn't mention a couple of things that I did mention, right? The shower curtain, knives, forks, plates, those kinds of things. Figure out, you can go to Walmart and figure out what that's gonna cost. And how many do you need, right? 2? Are you hosting parties at your house? 10? Whatever, right? Figure out your cost. But that gives you a really good idea of real world move-in costs, and you can budget from there. Right? Can you make do without chairs? Do you not need storage? Are you just gonna live on the floor? You're not gonna have a bed, you're just gonna throw a mattress on the floor? Each thing you could reduce the cost a lot. Do you need to live in that kind of budget? I hope not, right? Hopefully you come down, you've got loads of money, and this is all just interesting to see how tight of a budget you can live in. But I think when we're talking about what do you need to live month to month, a lot of people say, well, sure, you can say a lot of our budgets month to month are very low, but of course you have to buy all these things, and that's gonna use up that budget. You can't really live at a budget of, say, $800 a month over a long period of time. You would never be able to afford the basics for living. And I would argue that that is not true. Of course, food is going to use more than you expect. Food is always more expensive than anyone anticipates, right? It just is. Could you eat for, $1 a day? Yeah, a lot of Nicaraguans do. It sucks, right? You're gonna be super unhappy. Can you eat at $5 a day? Yes, obviously 5 times what Nicaraguans eat at. Still not gonna be very happy. Figure out where you're happy. Food is a difficult one. We're gonna do lots of episodes on food, and we've done some even on delivery food, what that costs. But if you take housing of between 150, and 150 is a completely doable number. Like, you can get really nice housing here in town for 150, 2 bedroom, 1 bath, right? It's not this super desirable part of town, but it's a nice part of town. Safe, friendly, attractive, just maybe not primo, right? This is primo. They were an absolutely top-end gated community. Maybe not number 1 in the city, but in the top 5, right? Really, really nice area. That was 200. And you could get more for 150, and if you needed to, somewhere you could get into for 100. But let's just say 150 per month, and then over time you need to absorb enough to purchase all the things that were just purchased here. Well, that's a lot, another $150 per month to do that. So that gets you up to $300 a month. Yes, it's gonna take an entire first year to spend enough, and maybe a few months into the second year, to average out that extra spend of the move-in cost. Okay, great. After a year and a half, now you have the budget to go out and buy more things. Maybe a television, for example. You'll probably want one. And that would be another 2 or 3 months of savings within that thing, but that's within that $300. $150 for the house, $150 for the necessary life spendings. And if you're on a total budget of $800, that leaves $500 for your, $15 of electrical cost? Great. And all your food and stuff, the food is gonna be the bulk of that. right? At $300, that's $10 per day. A lot of people will struggle to only spend $10 per day, right? If you want to eat, cook at home, be reasonable, only eat local produce, not import anything, very, very doable for normal people. If you want to go to a coffee shop and get coffee, you want to get pre-made cakes, you want to have an imported candy bar from the US, all that goes out the window because the cost of a single item will be several dollars. And if you have a large budget, those you'll never notice, right? But if you're on a tight budget, you will notice immediately, oh, I buy this one little thing every day and it's $2 or $3 extra. Well, $3 extra per day is $100 per month of additional budget. So you got to think about where that's going to go when you're on these super tight budgets. But in general, you know, it shows how you can have a 2-bedroom house in a great community, brand new or nearly new, and afford to put in chairs and tables and utensils and shower curtains and air conditioning. You can put, I mean, that includes the cost of buying an air conditioning unit, right? All within that price envelope. I think it shows just how affordable it is. This example, which oddly, the person who did it felt it was really expensive. I was like, this costs so much. And we're like, are you kidding? Like, look how cheap this is. But anyway, it's interesting. It's good to see just how cheap you can easily live. Of course, if you need transportation, you feel you have to have a scooter. Those kinds of things are going to add up, but you're still going to, over time, save enough money that you'll be able to cover it on a reasonable budget. You just have to tighten your belt a little bit, but it's doable. Be creative. Some of you are on those really tight budgets. I want to help you make this possible. I want you to see Nicaragua as a great opportunity. But for those of you who have more budgets, it's just really informational for how you can take this information and apply it for your own budgeting purposes. Thanks for joining me. Like and subscribe. If you'd like to support the channel, which would mean a lot to me, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Scott Allen Miller. And special thanks to Marcella from my team who assembled all this information for me from actual prices and actual stores and actual purchases. So none of this is hypothesis. This is all exact real world numbers. We had done a whole bunch of hypothesis for this ahead of time and had really good numbers. We really had this nailed within like 10%, and we buffered on the house, so it came in way cheaper than expected. But it's good to see real world prices and not be like, I think he's guessing, no. If you're gonna argue with these numbers, you have to call Cinsa, call La Curacao and be like, I don't think that's really what you sold it for. So if you'd like to support the channel, buymeacoffee.com/Scott Miller means a lot to all of us. It doesn't just help pay for everything. It's a really big vote of confidence in the work that we're doing here. And it's a beautiful day in the rain. I'm loving this. It's very light. It's cool. It's just such a break from normal things. I do love Guatemala weather, and this is a little bit of Guatemala raining on us here in Nicaragua. And as always, share the post on social media, tell friends and family about the show, go find another potential addicted morning, have their coffee and watch the show follower. It means so much to us, and the growth on the show has been amazing. Thank you so much to all of you. It's you guys making this possible, all of you who live in my little GoPro box. And with that, I will see all of you tomorrow.